growing up in that culture, and like Ellie grew up in that culture too, where you like make something and then you put it out there and you don't give a whole lot of thought to, like, whether it's the best thing ever or like if it's quote unquote ready enough or whatever for like an audience. You're just like, oh, I'm part of a community, so I like make something and we have a cultural exchange and that's that. And then, you know, you never think that like 20 years later somebody is gonna be like, this is my favorite cookbook ever, and you're like, oh, that's just something I made 20 years ago. Like, because that's what you do.
Well, that's like so valuable too, I think, because at this point, the amount of overthinking that I am likely to do now versus 20 years ago, like, yeah, there's sort of that immediacy that comes with just like, I have an idea, I'm inspired to do this, maybe someone else will be interested in it too. I can do it. Punk told me that I can just like glue stick some shit together and throw it out there and see what happens. And I think that is extremely cool. And that's actually kind of a reminder for, you know, me now, like, it doesn't have to be perfect, just make something.
Yes, especially if it's not on the internet and people can't leave you mean comments.
Hi, I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 28 years.
I'm Ellie Blue, the Vice President of Microcosm. We started this podcast to share what we've learned with newer publishers, so you can learn from our mistakes. Or maybe you just want to learn about the publishing industry.
This week, we welcome special guest to the pod, and first-time special guest to the pod, longtime Microcosm author, but new to this program. We have Ashley Rowe Palafox, who wrote Barefoot and In the Kitchen way back, I don't know, I want to say 20 years ago. Walk us through that. What possessed you to make a vegan cook zine in the early zeros?
It's the 20-year anniversary of it right now, actually, which is crazy to think about, but you're totally right. Yeah, so way back in 2005, I was living in Santa Cruz, going to college there, you know, surrounded by the punks and the hippies, living with some really cool people who were doing some really cool music and art. And I was cooking a lot. And I had been vegan for about 5 or 6 years. And, you know, living on my own, had started putting together a lot of recipes, like really sort of finding what I liked and figuring out what was good and what worked and what was easy and accessible with the ingredients that were available at that time, especially on a budget. And I started writing them down, and I started writing down recipes for myself, and then sort of realized, you know, I think I know some people who might like these, and maybe it would be helpful for people to give like their parents or their friends who aren't vegan and kind of like are interested maybe in accommodating or checking it out themselves, that like didn't really know where to start. So I had these recipes, and it just seemed so logical, like, you know, cut some shit out, use some flyers, use some, you know, the old zines, the backgrounds of them are hilarious. It's like old catalogs, old punk show flyers, draw some comics, which I was doing anyway, and, you know, slap them all together and make a zine. And so I did, and I made just a handful of copies at first, you know, thinking that I was just going to sort of give them to people that I knew. And I started taking them to shows, and I don't know, word spread in that weird, like early-ish internet time. There was a vegan community on LiveJournal, if anyone remembers those days. And, you know, I posted it up there and ended up making tons and tons of copies, and it just kind of spiraled into a bigger and cooler project than I imagined that it would be.
Cool. So you did 4 issues of Barefoot and In the Kitchen of our own accord. I
Yes.
feel like little subtitle gets dropped.
Yes.
And I was so confused when I started at Microcosm and that book had come out, and I was like, Barefoot and in the kitchen, really,
Yeah.
Microcosm?
Gross.
But then I
Yeah,
read it and I was like, I get it. You're
totally.
like
Yeah.
actually barefoot because you're in Santa Cruz and you're cooking for your friends.
Well,
Yeah,
shoes are outlawed. You're not allowed to wear shoes in Santa Cruz. Like anybody
true.
that's ever been there or never been there, like go anywhere and you will just see people not wearing shoes like in the grocery store.
True. And to be clear, that was not me, but it's in my house for sure, which was gross enough, honestly, because the house I was living in was like, there should have been shoes going on in there. I don't think I lived there for maybe 3 years. I cannot recall anyone mopping the floor at any point, but you know,
Why would anyone do that?
yeah, why?
So the zines eventually became a book, also called No, wait, that's not how the story goes. Tell it. Just continue, please.
Yeah, right. So it's sort of convoluted. It's funny to explain. So the zines, Barefoot and in the Kitchen, there were 4 issues, like you said, and I guess I don't know. I should start with how I linked up with you guys and with Microcosm. So after my Santa Cruz days, I moved up to Oakland and started working for AK Press, amazing anarchist publisher and distributor, who also worked closely with Joe and with Microcosm. And they were distributing my zines, and Microcosm was distributing my zines as well.
How did that start? Did you reach out to us? Did we reach out to you? I don't actually know.
I don't remember. I have to think. Well, okay, I can see 2 plausible scenarios. I feel like it's very possible I reached out to you because obviously I knew of Microcosm and loved, the stuff that Microcosm was publishing, and also knew you as a zine distributor. So highly possible that I reached out. I can dig through some old emails and see. But Joe, you would also come visit the warehouse. And so I met you in person through that. And I'm not sure if, I don't know, did we get chatting through that? Maybe. But somehow we got connected through that. And for a long time, I continuing to self-publish and go to the copy shop every whatever kind of frequently, which was cool because it meant people wanted it. And making more copies and sending them to you. And at some point, it came up like, well, hey, we're selling a bunch of these. People like them. Maybe we should do a book. And I got hooked up with Microcosm to do the Barefoot and in the Kitchen book, which, funny enough, especially now, doesn't have any of the recipes from the Barefoot and in the Kitchen zine. Actually, it has one, the banana bread.
Why? What happened?
Feel free to throw anybody under the bus that you would like.
Well, it wasn't my decision to do all new recipes. I believe that was suggested to me, requested. But, that was totally fine because in my view, the existing recipes were out there. It was a time when the zines were still in circulation as making new copies. They weren't like impossible to get. And so it seemed kind of cool to develop new stuff and, sort of expand the catalog. And so I did. Spent, I don't know, I want to say a couple of years on that before it came out. Doing recipe development, doing all the little drawings, working with y'all on editing and the cover and everything. And that came out way back in 2012, which is like a lifetime ago now.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And then, Joe, what happened next?
Well,
how did that you? How did it sell? How did it go?
So the thinking, and I know, like, I didn't agree with this decision. I was like kind of overruled by like the ambiguous body of like collective decision making at this time. I felt like it was fine to do the book because, of those zines, because, all of our best-selling like vegan cookbooks were like Please Don't Feed the Bears, Hot Damn and Hell Yeah. Like when we tried to kind of like move out of that and do like a traditional correct kind of like vegan cookbook or like book layout, people were just like, meh, doesn't seem as special. And so I really didn't understand the notion, but I think the thinking was more like, oh, we're like a serious grown-up publisher now, so like we should have like editing and layout and not just reprint things that came out 10 years ago. And whereas like, and I get why, but like that wasn't ever what people were responsive to, which is kind of interesting. We built this software from scratch to solve our own problems starting in 2001.
It's not only the reason for our survival, but the reason we've been a Publishers Weekly fastest growing publisher 3 years in a row.
Now we want to share it with you.
Join Working Lit and get back the agency to understand your publishing business, market and sell your books, and painlessly pay royalties.
Working Lit. Doing the math for publishers.
Visit workinglit.com to give it a try.
Lots of people love that book. I'm sure they do, and there's like thousands of them out there, and but it wasn't that book that caused somebody to contact us. I want to say this is 2 years ago, coincidentally the week before you were visiting Portland. And somebody said, this is my favorite cookbook. Do you have the missing issue? Because I can't find that one. And I said, I looked around and I couldn't find any, but I was like, but I know somebody that does. And then what happened?
Yeah, so like you said, coincidentally, I was in Portland and had hit you up. I hadn't seen you in a long time, and we ended up going out to brunch and kind of came to, well, what if we actually did do that book? The one that we maybe should have done back in 2012. But who am I to complain? That sounds great. Yeah, I want to do the book. So luckily I have all the originals, and one reason I'm so happy that these are being immortalized in perfect bound now is they are truly falling apart. It's 20-year-old like pages of catalogs that were glue sticked together and like ballpoint pen printer paper drawings. So I took good care of them, but they are like ready to truly retire. But yeah, so we got to chatting and we're like, yeah, I think we could do it. And, the idea was to compile them in a place that it'd be easily accessible. I think, we said in the cover copy, like, you don't have to dig through your co-op's rusty old cookbook bin or whatever to find them, which I think is funny, but also literally true. Like, that's absolutely where they are, the existing copies of the original zine. So for anyone who remembers those fondly, or for someone who's, maybe not familiar but wants some accessible recipes, or for someone who's like, oh, interesting, this is sort of a time capsule of like 20 years ago. Like, what were the punks and the vegans up to? The idea was to kind of make that easily accessible again, which I think is cool.
Yeah, and one of my favorite parts about this book, honestly, was getting to work with you, Ashley, as a very organized person and publishing professional. You were like, everything that needed to happen, you like had the best idea already, you were like, had the best idea for the title. Can you share more about that?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. First of all, best compliment ever. I appreciate that so much. Yeah, so the title, okay, so we had used Barefoot in the Kitchen already for the other one. So
not confusing at all.
It's fine.
The amount of times I had to explain this to different people on our staff is...
It's crazy. And you know what? I'll tell you what else I thought of actually when I was thinking about this yesterday. So the title of the new book is Cook Your Own Fucking Life. Yes. Incidentally, that is what we titled the introduction in the Barefoot and in the Kitchen book. So it's just like a big circle, everything, you know, Ouroboros, everything feeds onto itself. Like, exactly. It's crazy, but you know, no one can doubt that there's a through line, or I guess.
So can you explain the title for our readers who are not of that era?
Yeah.
Less punk.
Say it again.
For the less punk set.
Oh, for the less punk. Yeah, the less punk. If you're not as punk, if you're younger, I think if you grew up in like full-on internet era, this is maybe not going to be as familiar to you. But this is borrowed from Book Your Own Fucking Life, which was I guess a periodical, something that came out yearly, that was done by Maximum Rock and Roll, the punk zine magazine. And Book Your Own Fucking Life was something that put together resources and contact information for people who were trying to book shows and do DIY touring, and sort of connected punks to each other. And I've always thought that that was a really great title. It's stuck in there forever, as long as I've known about it. And it felt so natural to kind of bring it over to, you know, what I was doing and borrow it. I hope the Maximum Rock and Roll people understand and forgive me and like what I'm doing too. Definitely, you know, borrowed in admiration. But yeah, it was a kind of a similar idea of bringing that DIY ethos to what you're doing and connecting people to resources that they need to kind of live the life that they want to, and the world that they're trying to build.
And speaking of those resources, this was the other thing where I thought you just kind of had the most brilliant and simple idea for how to solve the issue, which is like the zines were full of references to like restaurants that had closed. And also had some things that, you know, maybe you didn't believe as much anymore 20 years later as you did then, or like wouldn't recommend or had learned more new things. And you came up with like a really neat idea for how to address that in the book.
Yeah, so, totally. Yeah. So the book, the main part of the book is straight up scans, photocopies of the old zines. But to sort of address those things that you just brought up, Ellie, we needed to do some annotations. And so I went through all of the old zines and found a couple of things. One was so many of these restaurants had closed. So in the original zines, the back of each one was a California restaurant guide. Again, this was, I mean, internet was around, but it was so different. You have to remember, like, it was not how it is now, and it was not as easy to find things. And so when you found something that you felt was a good resource for other people, you had to share it, and a lot of that was word of mouth. And for me, it was putting things that I liked, that I knew were good and could vouch for, in the back of the zine. So they had these expansive restaurant guides, like, here's everywhere I've ever been. I limited it to California because that's where I live, and that's, you know, where the large majority of things would be from. And now 20 years later, I'm looking at it like, oh man, a lot of these are not here anymore. Some of them,
kind of amazing that some are.
Oh my God, right?
Yeah. That was my thought. I was like, I'm an optimist, apparently.
Totally. Yeah, that was kind of delightful. Some of them have moved, because I got to update contact information for things that exist, which is great. I'm still happy to direct people to all of those that do exist. But, you know, we wanted to preserve like all of the content from the original zines, not just excise those pages, but also not steer someone to something that has not been around for 10 years, right? How sad. So I made little just sorry we're closed signs to kind of pin on all of the entries in the restaurant guide for the restaurants that were closed. So it looks, I hope that the cuteness of it is like offsetting the sadness of it a little bit.
Right.
It's a thoughtful touch.
Yeah, I mean, we got to be realistic. So that's that. If you go through the back of it and see all the "sorry, we're closed" signs, just know that, those were places that got me and a lot of us through a lot of times when there was way less vegan food available. And so, I honor them still, but don't go try to go to them. They're not there. And then for the rest of it, so like you said, there are annotations all throughout, which I ended up doing by hand to kind of keep with the zine style and aesthetic of how it originally was. And yeah, there's little, like minor corrections or notes just to give more context or suggestions. Yeah, there are some things where it's like, oh, why did I write this? I know why I did. I was 20. Like I had some kind of weird hatred of brown rice, which is so crazy to me because I love brown rice. I eat so much brown rice now. And so there's the saga of like issue 1, like, I will never tell you to eat brown rice. Like, oh, hippie shit. This is like the backlash to the Santa Cruz life. And then as we go along, I can't remember if it's issue 3 or 4, there's like brown rice has a little redemption moment. So I wanted to call that out. But yeah, there's little annotations. So it's all the original content, but there's also fresh stuff in there as well.
I like that even in just like 4 issues, you see your own evolution and like yourself, your views evolving and like growing up. And, as I recall, though, again, my memory is not too great, and this is 20 years ago. Like they came out in fairly rapid succession. Like there wasn't ever a big gap. I want to say that was sort of the era where like things just showed up in the mail. Like people didn't even like email you to be like, I have a new zine. They would just like send you the new zine, and then you'd be like, oh, cool, new Barefoot and in the kitchen. And then, because something like that, it's, well, and I think it's like any kind of, I don't want to call them drops, but any kind of like new thing dropping is still like pretty exciting in the exact same way. But obviously, like, the paper mail system had like, the discoverability was changed. And, and it's that thing where like the thing that really strikes me is how little the world has changed. Like I walk around Portland, Oregon, which is very changed, but like I see like flyers on telephone poles and they have the exact same aesthetic that like flyers on telephone poles did 30, 40 years ago, and it's like not like, and that is incredible to me. And, and I think about like how most people will probably discover your zine in like a weird independent small store in their town, just like they probably discovered your zine that way once upon a time when there were like, 2 copies on the shelf. So like, I don't know, like how is your relationship with this sort of, I don't know, I don't want to call it nostalgia, but like, how do you like relate with and interact with like these kind of like your like sort of like punk cultural heritage?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, that's something that I really got to kind of dive back into doing this project of turning the zines into a book. Because I haven't made a zine in a long time, and they haven't been something like my zines haven't been something that I thought about very much in a long time. But, you say that you see things around you that a lot of them actually haven't changed. And I kind of feel that way internally too, really. Like if I was going to make a zine today, I think I would do it the exact same way, honestly. And I think there's that sort of cultural through line, our like punk inheritance, if you want to think of it that way, which I think I do, which I really value. I love those aesthetics, and I think that probably the most critical thing about it is just sort of having this idea that like if you have an idea, you can just do it. Like do it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it will be something that you're able to do in your own way, and your people will find it. Like, the people who are interested in that will find it and find you. And that's how we strengthen and build and maintain our communities. So yeah, I would say I haven't been as in touch with like the zine community as I was 20 years ago, but punk for sure. Punk goes on forever, and it changes and evolves, and my relationship to it has changed and evolved, but in some ways it hasn't too. Like, I'm still surrounded by people who play music, and even outside of like that very specific sort of facet of it, people who grew up in punk and sort of have that attitude and ethos and ethics, I think, as a result of it. I still find those people, and they still find me.
Oh. Can you talk a little more about other creative work that you've done other than these zines and cookbooks? Yeah.
So I've done, I draw, you see the little comics in the zines and the both books actually. I do the cover art for them. And I've also been lucky to work with Microcosm on a couple of other things, actually doing some illustrations for, remember?
I was trying to remember. I was like, I remember, but I couldn't remember what it was.
I did a Zine's Guide to New York.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
A couple little illustrations for that. Alive with Vigor, I have a comic in.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Got it.
And then I worked with Mitch Clem, awesome punk comic artist, did a few issues of a zine, actually kind of turned real book, really, called As You Were, where he gathered a bunch of punk comic artists, and each issue had a theme. And I participated in a few of those, which was really cool. And other than that, I mean, I'm still drawing. I'm trying to keep up on it. I kind of stopped for a while, and then a few years ago had like truly like a crisis moment where I was like, oh, fuck. Wait, I'm supposed to be doing this. Shit. What am I doing? And sort of came back to it, which was interesting. Same time as the original Barefoot in the Kitchen zines, I had a very shitty band in Santa Cruz called Flaming Coffin Death Box. There used to be stuff on the internet, but I don't think there is anymore. But, that was a lot of fun. And I had stopped playing music for a long time. Then I was like, wait, I'm supposed to be doing that too. And kind of came back to that.
Our industry is run by billionaires and conglomerates.
At Microcosm, we wanted the freedom to independently sell our books, easily pay royalties, manage our inventory, and understand our business all in one place.
That's why we've been using our own software since 2001.
Now, we want to share it with you.
Working Lit is the only business success software that is created and owned 100% by publishers for publishers.
Join Working Lit and get the agency you need to help your business grow.
Visit workinglit.com to try it for free. Like, I've done this for, like 30 some years. And, and as like a participant, and then like as a consumer, maybe even a little longer than that. And then, so I think about it a lot where like, and then the irony is like, I haven't really listened to like new music in over 25 years. Ellie listens to more new music all the time, and like she's the same age as I am, so that's like a little bit indicting, but here we are. And so, but the thing is that like, I never really thought of myself as a musician. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but like, it's like, it's a participatory culture. But the thing is like, I always thought of it as like the role is like you make something and you're part of a discourse and you're like part of a community, and then you're like kind of challenging the views and the like discourse in that community. So like one thing that I was able to convince Ellie to do with me after doing it myself every weekend is that I'm like, so like writing isn't my job, but it's like my hobby. And so I was like, okay, so like that's, you do your hobbies on the weekend and then you work during the week. And then, so this year I was like, Ellie, we should make a zine every month that we make on the week. And we made a zine for our friend when she was in the hospital last year. And that was so
No,
fun.
you're telling it wrong. You're telling the story wrong.
All right. Well, tell it correctly.
We made the zine together. We had the idea together. And then I had the idea we should do a zine every month for a year. And you had the idea we should do a zine every week for a year.
That all is correct also. So I was already doing like a research project every weekend and like doing a writing project every weekend. So I'm really glad that you recall it as like this was your idea, and then we collaborated on doing it together, because that has obviously made it way more fun. But so I guess that's the thing, like, but you know, Ashley is our guest here. But
Ashley will argue about this later, don't worry.
If you want, like, so like, do you have like people in your life that you continue to have this kind of like role with, or like continue to hold up, you know, because like you had like a bakery, you had like, you know, other kind of participatory things with like other people. So like, what does that part of your life look like? And it doesn't have to be, you know, punk, but you know, something.
It might have to be. Yeah, so that's kind of related to what I was saying about sort of coming back to kind of these creative pursuits more recently in the last few years. I've got a buddy who I've been having drawing dates with recently, which has been really great because, you know, I love drawing and I'm not very good at making time for it. I don't know why. It's just hard. But having someone else who's like, hey, want to go make art? It's like, yes, definitely. Meet you there. You know, we go out, I leave my house, bring my sketchbook and all my pens. So that's not really like toward any specific end, but just as a practice, which I think is so great. And I enjoy that a lot. And that also, you know, kind of getting into that habit does make me do it more at home and on my own too. And one of my really good friends and I had been playing music together, like not really writing stuff, not a serious band or anything, but just sort of getting into the habit of playing together. And that has been really nice. Sadly, they just moved away, so I am without that, but looking to kind of get into that with another one of my friends. My husband's an incredible drummer, which is like intimidating. We're not a good match in that way at all, really, but you know, also amazing. Like, who lives with a really good drummer? That's crazy. What a privilege, right? So that's, I think, in the works, which should be fun.
Are you working on any other books? And if you're not, what would your next book be if there was one?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not working on anything. What would my next book be? I don't know. I mean, I think I'd be interested in doing more comics. I haven't done that in a while. And what always strikes me when I do make a comic is I love like reading and consuming comics too. And it always strikes me how the thing that takes the fucking longest to produce, because you're writing it, you're probably storyboarding it, you're penciling it, you're inking it, it's the whole thing. It takes forever. And then people read it in like 2 seconds. It's the craziest thing. Like, it takes so much less time to consume than, you know, reading even a novel or a whatever, any kind of a book that takes so long. But I do love that. I don't know what the topic would be. I like, you know, I grew up also in the sort of era of little like personal slice of life comics, and I did a lot of those for a while. I did put out a zine of that actually, which is long gone now. But yeah, I don't know. I like stuff like that. My college thesis was a comic.
Oh, cool.
was crazy.
What was it a comic about?
It was about workers' cooperatives.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I mentioned I had worked at AK Press, and I actually moved up to Oakland to do an internship at AK Press, which is how I got hooked up there, because I was doing research for this thesis, which was a comic about collectively running a workplace. So I think that's, that's in there. I don't know if a new book is going to come out of it, but I could imagine wanting to work on that. Yeah.
Have you worked at collectives after AK?
No, so I worked there, which, yes, they're a collective, of course. And then I ended up starting my own business, which was a partnership. So in a way, that's a collective of just two people. It's not like we didn't have employees. So it's just the two of us, myself and my friend Carolyn. And so we ran that. That was a vegan bakery called Fat Bottom Bakery in Oakland.
Nice.
Ran that as a partnership for a few years until we realized, the sort of hustle of running a small business is like not as fun as baking is.
Yeah,
obviously.
Yeah.
I've asked anyone and found that out, but that was a really cool experience, and I learned a lot. And I don't think in the future I would do it again, but if I had to go back into the past and be in my 20s, I would for sure do that again. It was a great experience,
I love that. Yeah, I know. And that's kind of the harder part, is like our job has become less about making things than it's more about like keeping people towards the like strategic goals, and like being, like working together as a team of, dozens, rather than like just like making stuff. And yeah, it's a very different thing, and it was a lot harder to embrace the joys of it compared to like when you're like, oh, we're just making a new book, how fun. But so like, how do you think, and I don't know, I mean, I guess like on the spot, your worker co-op graphic novel, to really formalize it, do you feel like, I feel like especially the books that AK Press publishes about worker cooperatives, and like worker councils, and they're always like stuff from like the 1800s, or like these like a very European examples or whatnot. But do you feel like, and so to me, the thing that's funniest is always like kind of sort of like how little like the framing changes. It's like almost like a recipe where you're like, you still make a worker council and like, your shepherd's pie the same way, despite 20 years going by. So do you feel like that would feel dated now, or do you feel like it's sort of like timeless in the same way as the cookbooks?
That's a good question. Not sure, honestly. I have not looked at it in a real long time. Kind of intentionally.
Understandable.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of it that would stand up. I mean, and like I was just saying, I've been out of that world for a long time, so it might be tough for me to tell what is dated or not. I think if I was going to pursue sort of looking at that again, it would take a lot of research, like current research. At that time I did.
Your sorry, we're closed sticker again.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is not how it works. Oops. Anyway.
Right. I mean, this is the thing. It's like, like 30 years in, I'm like, it's amazing how many places are still around, like it's also sad, like how many places go away and like how many places I love. But like the thing I'm continually struck by is I'm like, I have had a relationship with this same person at this same place since the 90s, like since the mid 90s. Like that's wild.
I think that kind of environment really attracts diehards like that. That doesn't surprise me at all.
I feel like one of the things that we're running out of time a little bit, but I would love to kind of end on a note of like talking about like sort of what it means to you to revisit past projects or not, and like, do you have advice for other people who are listening who are maybe thinking about projects they did 20 years ago or 5 years ago or 30 years ago or whatever, and are thinking about them in a new way or bringing them back to life?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I would say have empathy for your young self. That's one thing. I mean, really, like, I talked about some stuff that I updated or annotated for the book, and some of it, as I said, is like, why would you say that? And then the second thought after that is like, well, I know exactly why I said that. Like, that was something that came out of me with the information and the context and the mindset that I had at that time. And it's like, there's nothing that's like super embarrassing in the book, but there's stuff that I would frame differently now, or maybe like not right. But I have to understand, like, yeah, that was like little Ashley. That's cool. She, she was really doing it. She went for it. But I think that is how I would recommend approaching it. Maybe other people don't have that strong of a feeling when they look at their own past work, but I bet a lot of people do. And then in terms of like, I don't know, would I recommend doing it? Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting. It's instructive, I think, to you on an individual level to kind of revisit where you came from and what you were thinking about and what you were inspired to create. And if it's something that's like a zine or, old music, like anything that you were using to sort of engage with your community, that's really interesting. I think it can bring up sort of memories of things, the way things were at that time that might not be top of mind for you now, but can kind of bring those back to life in some way, both for you looking at it, and if you decide to redistribute it in some version for other people who maybe were there too and were like, oh shit, yeah, my co-op did have that zine, hey, or whatever it is. Or like, oh, remember when everything looked like this, or we all used this word?
Any parting words of wisdom?
Make some vegan food. If you're not vegan, try some vegan food, hang out with your friends, make some art, make some music. It doesn't have to be perfect. Remind me that too. I would appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub,
on Twitter at Microcosm,
on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing,
on Instagram at Microcosm_pub,
and here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.